You've probably seen the image, a floating head with its bloody organs dangling as it drifts through the night. It's a classic image from Southeast Asian horror. But today, we're going way beyond that one gruesome picture. We're going to decode the ahep, a spirit that's really a mirror, reflecting some of Cambodia's deepest cultural fears and its history.
Our journey starts where the city lights fade out, deep in the Cambodian countryside. See, in the quiet darkness of the rice paddies and the floating villages, folklore isn't just some old-timey entertainment. No, it's a living, breathing part of the world that explains everything.
And right at the heart of that folklore is the op. The definition itself is just terrifying. On the surface, she's a normal woman during the day, but when night falls, her head actually detaches from her body, organs and all, and floats off into the darkness, hunting for something very, very specific.
Now, before we zero in specifically on Cambodia, it's really important to get that this isn't just some one-off legend. The ahop is actually part of a whole terrifying region-wide family of spirits.
This description, this is the image that ties them all together. It is such a visceral, unforgettable picture that has haunted Southeast Asia for centuries. You have the glowing entrails, the silent flight. I mean, it's the perfect archetype for body horror, right? It takes the human form we know and twists it into something completely unnatural.
And this list really shows you there's a kind of shared cultural DNA here. Whether you call her Krasyu in Thailand, Penanggalan in Malaysia, or Op in Cambodia, that core fear is exactly the same. It's proof that these stories and beliefs were crossing borders and adapting long before we had modern maps.
This whole shared mythology is just fascinating, and it gets me thinking, does your local folklore have a version of this creature? If it does, I'd love for you to share the name and the story in the comments. Let's really see how wide this web of folklore stretches.
Okay, so now let's zoom in on Cambodia. Because while her cousins are pretty famous, the ahop has her own unique story, one that's woven deeply into the very fabric of Khmer belief.
So, how does one become an ahop? Well, the lore says there are several ways, and let me tell you, none of them are pleasant. Notice the themes here. You've got tragic death, especially related to childbirth, the dangers of dabbling in black magic, or the mob, and these powerful, unresolved emotions. The key takeaway is that an ahop is almost always a woman whose life, or afterlife, has been violently thrown off course.
And these aren't just some abstract campfire tales either. The stories are tied to real places. From the ancient, jungle-covered ruins near Siem Reap to the still, dark waters of the Tonle Sap Lake, the ahop is a creature of rural Cambodia, born from that deep darkness far away from any city lights.
But here's the thing. A monster like the ahop doesn't exist just to scare people. It serves a much deeper purpose. It's a reflection of a society's most profound anxieties.
This is where we start to peel back the layers and see what the myth really means. So, the ahop's craving for blood and placentas, it's not just there for shock value. It's a direct expression of the very real, very terrifying dangers of childbirth before modern medicine existed. The stories about black magic curses, those are powerful tools for social control, setting moral boundaries, and warning women not to seek power outside of traditional roles. The ahop basically becomes the living embodiment of everything that can go wrong, both physically and socially.
And these beliefs weren't just theoretical. People had a real game plan. The most famous method is putting thorny branches around the house of a pregnant woman. The thinking is actually kind of brilliant. The ahop's long, dangling intestines will get snagged on the thorns, trapping her until sunrise, which of course would destroy her.
Of course, a folkloric figure this powerful was absolutely destined for the big screen. But in Cambodia, the ahomp's journey into cinema is uniquely tangled up with the country's tragic modern history.
Just look at this timeline for a second. In 1980, right after the fall of the Khmer Rouge, a regime that actively tried to destroy all traditional culture and folklore, what was the very first film they produced? My Mother is Arm. This was so much more than just a horror movie. It was an act of cultural defiance. It was Cambodia telling its own stories again, out loud.
So what this means is that when you see the ahop in a modern Cambodian film, it's carrying more than just the terror of folklore. It's carrying the weight of history. The ahop becomes a symbol for processing unspeakable violence, for the perversion of the natural order, for the ghosts of a past that simply refused to stay buried.
So when you put it all together, the Ahapa is so much more than a simple scary story. It's this enduring cultural symbol that has adapted and survived, reflecting the fears of each new generation.
There's this quote from the scholar Avery Gordon that just absolutely nails the modern role of the op. It's the unresolved social violence of that dark period in history making itself known. The ghost is literally a manifestation of trauma, a lingering presence that forces a society to confront what it has tried so hard to forget.
So why does the AHAP endure? Well, it's because it's doing so much work all at once. It's a guardian of tradition, a warning against breaking taboos, a reflection of historical pain, and, let's be honest, a terrifyingly effective monster for the movies. It is a complex, powerful, cultural icon.
Now, we may not believe in a literal floating head, but every single culture has its own version of the Alp, its own monsters. And that really forces us to ask, what unresolved fears and social anxieties do our modern monsters represent? What are they really telling us about ourselves?
If you found this deep dive as fascinating as I did, please share it with a friend who gets that horror is often so much more than just a jump scare.
And we definitely want to know where this journey should take us next. Drop a comment below with a country whose folklore you think deserves its own deep dive.
And hey, be sure to subscribe, because our next explainer is going to take the themes we talked about today and show you how they show up in a completely different, but just as chilling, spirit from the other side of the globe. You are not going to want to miss it.